Is Narutoverse Universal or Universe level? That's the age-old question everybody wants to know. I'm sure that you've seen the online wars between the weebs and the anime community caused by this primal topic. In fact, I've even dipped my toe in the pool a few years ago, and OGs might remember my first Universal Naruto video that I ever made back in 2021. Remember the amount of legendary debates that it led to, like the ones with Happy117 and other anime content creators? What a time to be alive. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to reminisce about those days. Anyway, cutting the waffle, I'm not here claiming Naruto is definitely universal. I'm not saying I do believe that myself. It's just fun to talk about, right? I couldn't pass up another opportunity to talk about Universal Naruto because it's fun. And I wanted to create a new and more improved video than the last one. It's been a while and a lot has changed since, so there's a lot to go over. I will be using the databooks because they are written by the author Kishimoto to provide supplementary information on characters and their jutsu, kind of like an encyclopedia. I'm not sure why anybody would dislike them. They can be somewhat poetic, but I take things like that into account. Not everything in it is poetic. For example, in this video, I won't be mentioning things that I think are blatantly dumb, like Tamari being able to blow away the universe. I think that's a mistranslation anyway. I'm not going to be mentioning Madara being able to cut all things in the universe. Remember that Madara is super arrogant, so I'll take all of his statements with a grain of salt. I also won't be bringing up infinite statements because there's unironically an infinite amount of them within the series. I would be here all day going over all of them, so it isn't worth it because most of them are just hyperbolic like they are in most other series. There are some infinite statements that are somewhat valid or could be valid, but having infinite power is actually above universe level, it's high universe level, and that defeats the purpose of this video because I only really want to go over universe level scaling in particular. For that reason, I won't be mentioning high dimensional scaling from the Otsutsuki god either. As always, let's define what being universe level actually means before we get into this video, because you'll be surprised how many illiterates there are in the power scaling community. Versus Battle Wiki is considered the gold standard of power scaling definitions, so most people use it. I don't always agree with how and where they rate particular characters. I think their framework is very good. Whoever wrote that in particular was cooking, so for the sake of this video, that's what I'll be using to be as fair as possible. So universe level is defined as a character or an object that can create or destroy all celestial bodies within a finite 3D space that is at least equivalent to the size of the observable universe, via an omnidirectional attack that covers the entire space in a short amount of time, and alternatively being able to create or significantly affect a universe or a dimension of that size. This isn't mentioned, but keep in mind that a space-time is a 3D construct with an additional temporal dimension of time running through it. Now this doesn't make it 4D, because in order to be 4D, the universe must have at least 4 spatial dimensions. Secondly, I think it's important to establish that the Naruto universe is based off our own universe, as it shares many similar properties. I'd even go as far as saying that there's a preponderance of evidence suggesting that it's around the same size. The planet that Naruto resides on is called Earth, which is orbited by the Moon, which orbits the Sun, which does suggest a similar cosmology. The Naruto last movie novelization even makes mention of Saturn's rings, which does suggest that the wider solar system is also the same. Naruto's universe even shared the same constellations, like the Taurus and the Aries constellations, according to the Sasuke Retsuden novel, as well as the Cancer constellation, according to episode 8 of the Boruto anime. So a fair conclusion to come to is that the author Kishimoto has based the Naruto universe on our own one. So it should be of a similar size to our own universe, which spans over 94 billion light years across, at least. Now, the most viable universal scaling begins as early as the Road to Ninja movie. I know a lot of people might be wondering if the Road to Ninja movie is even canon, and I would argue yes. Not necessarily because it's advertised in both the databook and the manga directly, but considering that the author of Naruto, Kishimoto, wrote the entire script of a movie and claimed that it was linked to the original manga, which alone gives it validity. Kishimoto even created a special one-shot manga that is set a night before the movie, even having his name first as the writer in the movie's credits. But if it is canon, then when could the events of the movie have been set? Well, I'd wager that the Road to Ninja movie is set likely half a year before the war arc. I say that because the third databook confirms that Kisame is 32 and was born in March, but he's 33 by the time of his death in the war arc in October. So there was probably a 7-month gap that this movie could have taken place between. It's suggested that the movie is set right after the Leaf Village has been rebuilt after Pain's assault, but right before Naruto goes to Genbu Island. Also, the events of Road to Ninja are no longer than 2 days, so I'm not sure why people think that it can't fit the timeline. It's a very short amount of time, relatively speaking. But why is a movie important when providing universe level scaling in Naruto specifically? Well, during the movie, Obito uses the power of the first 7 Biju that the Akatsuki have gathered to cast a jutsu called the Limited Tsukuyomi. The limited Tsukuyomi is described as another reality that is a perfect copy of a world. It's like a reflection of a world, but there's slight differences, which means that it's essentially a parallel world. As verbatim stated in the official English and German movie blurbs, which respectfully refers to the limited Tsukuyomi as a parallel universe / alternate dimension. Parallel worlds are universes that coexist with our own, but slightly differ from it. The limited Tsukuyomi has the same size and cosmology as the Naruto universe, but the differences are more so to do with who's alive and what personalities those characters have. We know that the normal Tsukuyomi is a genjutsu caused by Itachi to create a world that stretches on for infinity, but ultimately isn't physically real, because it's just an illusion that takes place in the mental plane inside the mind. The limited Tsukuyomi on the other hand is different because it's not a genjutsu, well not a typical genjutsu. It's a physically real universe, therefore may exist in the wider multiverse. We know this because during the movie, Naruto and Sakura are said to be transported to this parallel universe, which is also backed up by the official trailer. If Obito had put Naruto in a genjutsu, then he could have just kidnapped his body, but that isn't the case, because he teleported Naruto and Sakura to a parallel universe. This suggests that the parallel universe does physically exist, which I guess it would have to, because Obito can move between the normal and parallel universe with his Kamui, even feeling threatened by parallel reality Itachi's Amaterasu. At the end of the movie, Kakashi supports this by claiming that Naruto and Sakura entered the parallel world through a space-time ninjutsu. Another issue people bring up is that we can see this parallel universe in a glass ball, so it's suggested to be contained inside of it, and if that's the case, it can't exactly be a universe, right? Well, Obito used this same crystal ball to use something called the telescope jutsu to watch Naruto the night before he cast the limited Tsukuyomi. The third Hokage has also used this jutsu to monitor the villages of a hidden leaf like an invisible camera. Obito later confronts Naruto and Sakura to cast the limited Tsukuyomi using the crystal ball to teleport them to a parallel universe and then watch him through it. At the end of the movie, Naruto does manage to somehow break the crystal ball from inside the parallel universe, which then slowly desummons them back to their own universe. This completely debunks the theory that the parallel universe was being hosted or contained within the crystal ball, since the parallel universe continues to exist shortly after the destruction of the crystal ball. So now that we know the first 7 Biju can be used to create a parallel universe, why does this link to power scaling? Well, firstly, we established earlier that creating a universe constitutes as a universe level feat, especially because chakra was used for this jutsu. Secondly, it was verbatim stated that it was the power of the Biju that allowed Obito to use this universal level feat. All 9 Biju combined should give you greater accumulative power than a limited Tsukuyomi, considering the missing 9 and 8 tails are as strong as, if not stronger than other 7 Biju combined. This tells us that the 10 tails, when completed, is at least twice as strong as this universe level feat. But now speaking on the Ten Tails power, the 4th Dao book claims Kaguya's Ten Tails was said to have been the progenitor of Shinra Bansho. Shinra Bansho is a Japanese term that means all of creation and can interchangeably be used with universe. It might not be that far-fetched considering that in the Naruto Ninja Storm 4 promotional material, it was claimed that the Ten Tails created the world, which in this context may mean universe. The 4th Dao book on a different page elaborates on this by telling us that Ten Tails is only a fragment of a god tree that gave birth to the Tenshi. Tenshi means heaven and earth, but is more commonly used to refer to the universe as a whole, if you ask most translators in this context, which does hold some validity considering that many years later in Boruto, the scientist Amado confirmed that Ten Tails is literally a fragment of a god tree and serves as a seedling that eventually grows into the god tree. So it's possible that at some point Kaguya used her 10 tails to create the universe and then use the worlds inside of it to harvest even more trees. This might explain why Kaguya didn't want to fight on Earth, as she viewed it as a nursery. So it's possible that the Otsutsuki might just be generating universes inside of universes, like some Inception type shit. When Kinshiki finds cracks leading to Naruto's world, he refers to it as Kaguya's world, as it may be the case that she created it using the Ten Tails. The world in this context may refer to Naruto's universe, as the cracks are found on the moon rather than on Earth, so it can't be referring to Earth. Kinshiki theorized that the cracks in space-time were generated by an abnormal spatial curvature of 15, which is 5 points above what is considered abnormal. And some of you might think that he's referring to space's gravity, but I don't think that's the case. There's other planets in Naruto's solar system, like Saturn for example, that have way larger gravities, yet don't tear space-time. So it's the abnormal chakra on Earth that's affecting the space-time of Naruto's universe, allowing other Otsutsuki to enter through the cracks. Momoshiki and Kinshiki use the cracks to eventually make it to Naruto's universe, but have to fly around in space a little in order to find the Earth, which does imply they're referring to the universe as a whole. During the war arc, Obito eventually collected the final 2 Biju and summoned the Ten Tails, to become his 3rd ever Jinchuriki after Hagoromo and Hamura. This is possible through sealing the power of the Ten Tails into the human body, and this process also grants 6 sparks power. Obito as a Ten Tails Jinchuriki was said by Killer Bee to be way stronger than the Ten Tails by itself, so should have universe levels of power. Madara would then become the 4th Ten Tails Jinchuriki and surpass Obito, so should have even greater power. Naruto would also gain a similar power when the Sage's 6 buffs directly gave him half of his chakra and bestowed him with 6 buff Sage mode, a transformation which allowed Naruto to control Shinra Bansho, which we already established to mean universe. These characters can all wield the truth-seeking orbs, which are balls of malleable black chakra that can be shaped into weapons, shields and platforms. The 4th book claims that the truth-seeking orbs have the power of the universe, or contain the power of the universe. The 4th Ninja Storm game also backs this up by saying that the truth-seeking orbs contain the power of the entire world, which in context may be referring to the universe, considering the prior statements. Granted, these statements could just mean that the truth-seeking orbs are made up of the same fundamental forces that created the universe, that being yin and yang, but it could also mean that the truth-seeking orbs have a power of the universe within them, so it ultimately just depends on interpretation. More interestingly, the truth-seeking orbs contain fire, wind, lightning, earth, water, and yin and yang releases, therefore can nullify any typical ninjutsu. Yin-yang release exists outside the 5 basic elemental natures and was written on the Uchiha stone tablet to be 2 polar opposites that can act together to give rise to Shinra Bansho, which means the universe. Yin and yang jutsu, when used on a lesser scale, the Izanagi, allow the user to turn fantasy into reality. Using Itachi's description of the Izanagi, it allows the user to create alternate realities by diverging the timeline to branch off and reach an outcome that is beneficial to the user. Yin-Yang release as full power is sometimes called the creation of all things jutsu, and was used by the Sage's 6 buffs to create anything out of nothing. The Sage's 6 buffs, for example, used it to split the Ten Tails' chakra into 9 separate tailed beasts. Naruto used it to recreate Kakashi's eye. Unfortunately, this power that Naruto had is eventually lost after the war arc, hence he can't heal his right arm back. Once Madara awakens the Rinnin Sharingan, he can cast the Infinite Tsukiyomi on the moon to reflect the light onto the population of Earth and trap them in an internal genjutsu. Obito claimed that the Limited Tsukiyomi was just a beta version of the Infinite Tsukiyomi, implying that each Tsukiyomi dream is a parallel universe, which is as many beings that are trapped in the Infinite Tsukiyomi. That could be millions to billions to even trillions, depending on how big you think the Naruto War's population is, including humans, animals, and insects, since all these beings can be put under genjutsu. This would suggest the creation of a wider multiverse, but if I'm being honest, I think that the Limited Tsukiyomi, despite being inferior to the Infinite Tsukiyomi, is fundamentally different. The Infinite Tsukiyomi clearly places you under a genjutsu, whereas the Limited Tsukiyomi transports you to a real parallel universe. Moving on to Kaguya. Kaguya's chakra is far greater than the Ten Tails, who should be able to create a parallel universe through the Limited Tsukiyomi. She is known for her 6 interconnected dimensions, each of which hosts a planet with a unique environment like the lava, ice, desert, acid, gravity, and Genesis worlds, respectively. Some people take this to mean that each dimension or world is just the size of a planet, but that isn't true. In the Japanese, each dimension is called a Jikukan, which simply translates to space-time. A space-time is an area that contains 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. The only way to reach different space-times is through space-time ninjutsu, which does require the user to teleport to the desired coordinates, which means that they aren't just planets found in the Naruto universe, but their own separate areas that are extremely large. Since we can experience day and night cycles in the ice dimension, which does confirm that it tilts on its axis, we also see a fully lit moon in the ice dimension and a star in the desert dimension, which does suggest that these spacetimes contain solar systems. But they could be even larger, since Hagoromo refers to Kaguya's Genesis dimension as an alternate dimension, which is interchangeable with parallel universe. This isn't the first time Kaguya's dimensions have been called parallel universes. Kaguya's dimension is called an Ikai in the Boruto anime. The typical translation for this Japanese word is another world or spirit world, which can vary depending on the context. For example, the official translation by Viz translate Ikai to mean parallel dimension, which is also backed up by the English dub.
An account that a parallel dimension exists.
Now we've established that Kaguya's spacetimes are parallel universes. How exactly is she herself universal, or how does she scale to this? The 4th data book states that she used a Rinnin Sharingan to create 6 dimensions with a jutsu called Ameno Minaka. I've heard a lot of people claim that this is a mistranslation, but it really isn't if you take a look at the original Japanese. The word sumugu very clearly means to make or spin yarn, which is a form of creation. It basically means that Kaguya created these dimensions the same way that I could knit a scarf. Sumuku was correctly translated to the word create by either organic dinosaur or rockfish, who are both well-known translators in the community and are native Japanese speakers. Personally, I think it's quite frankly disrespectful to think that they got the translation wrong, especially if you're not native Japanese yourself. I've also heard people dismiss this because it's only mentioned in the title and not elaborated on in the description of the 4th data book. The description only mentions that the Ameno Minaka is able to switch the universe around Kaguya with one of her own personal dimensions. This indicates that her dimensions could be just as big as the Naruto universe in order to fill in the gap left behind. Everyone near her at the time won't be shifted either, presumably because the Ameno Minaka is inspired by the first Japanese deity, Ameno Minaka, who in mythology is the center of the universe. The title does suggest that Kaguya is able to freely create universes, and the description suggests that she can instantly shift universes. Just because two different things are suggested doesn't mean neither are true, since a jutsu can have more than one ability. The Ameno Minaka being able to create and shift entire universes both meet the universe level criteria that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, especially because it's implied that she can quickly shift and create dimensions, although repeated use does take a toll on her body because of a chakra expense. Some people even claim that she's rewriting her dimension like a genjutsu, which was suggested by Kakashi, instead of just shifting them, but I'm gonna have to disagree with that. All of her dimensions independently exist, hence Kaguya can also use Bamutsu Hirasaka to link and move between these dimensions. Even after her death, they're still accessible through Sasuke's space-time ninjutsu. Now don't get me wrong, she can destroy the dimensions with the expanding truth-seeking orb. The 4th data book says Shinra Bansho no Chikara or Fuzi Shikon Tonyobu Shikoku no Tama. This phrase can be translated as a jet black orb that seals the power of creation, calling forth chaos. Being a little bit more specific, Shinra Bansho means all of creation of the universe. Both words basically mean the same thing, so like I said earlier, they are interchangeable. Given these points, I think it's reasonable to think that the expanding truth-seeking orb could have the power to potentially destroy the entire universe, which isn't that far-fetched considering that Blurb claimed Kaguya planned to destroy everything. It's also said to contain all 7 elements, which is fundamentally the same as the ordinary truth-seeking orbs, but way larger in size. More specifically, it can return the world to nothingness, which I believe in context means the entire universe. The 6 dimensions created by Kaguya are based off the 6 realms of existence in Buddhist cosmology, which are sometimes referred to as worlds, despite representing a universe. These dimensions were created by Kaguya using the Rinnegan, which means Samsara Eye. The Buddhist worlds are a part of a cycle of Samsara, and are associated with different forms of existence. So I think it's fair to interpret a world as a universe in the context of her 6 dimensions that she can create, destroy, and recreate, which is also inspired by the Buddhist concept, which is the law of existence and non-existence repeated endlessly. Momoshiki and Kinshiki are introduced. Since she feared their existence so much, she built an army. Momoshiki's own universal scaling comes from a light novel called the Boruto movie novelization, which many people are skeptical of if it's even canon. I would argue that the Boruto movie novelization is canon as it was written by Kodachi, who is the author of the Boruto manga up until chapter 52, and this novel is even supervised by the creator of Naruto Kishimoto. The novel is shown on Naruto's timeline alongside the manga's continuity. This timeline was licensed by Shueisha Incorporated, who are the publishers of Naruto. While Naruto is the creator of the manga, Shueisha are the owners, therefore have more say in the direction and continuity of a story than the author does. It's comparable to how comic books work. I call this corporate canon. Even though Stan Lee was the author and the face of many of the comics that we know of today, he never really had as much say as his publisher Marvel Comics. The Naruto timeline can be found on the Shueisha website inside of the manga volumes and Naruto novels. Many people claim that because the Boruto movie novelization is based on the original movie that has now been retconned by the manga and anime, so as a novel. But that's simply not true, because even in an updated 2019 timeline that is newer than both the manga and anime, it still shows a movie novelization on it alongside the Sasuke Retsuden novel. The novel, manga and anime are all essentially the same but have minor differences that I don't think inherently lead to major contradictions, so should all be held with equal and valid interpretations. It's ultimately up to the reader to choose which of them you want to follow. The Boruto movie novelization states that Momoshiki constructed an isekai sometime in the past and used it as a seedbed to grow more chakra fruits. The anime also confirms that Boruto's fight versus Momoshiki took place inside of his isekai. His isekai was compared to Kaguya's spacetimes, so we know that it refers to a unique space that is separate from a normal reality. It also contains a sun within it, with the addition of a starry sky. But what exactly is an isekai? While the definition of an isekai has been widely contested within the community, it's never really made sense to me why. An isekai plainly translates to a parallel world. And now some people think that this refers to only a planet, but that's frankly idiotic. Since when has parallel world ever meant that in fiction? That's not what isekai means. It's completely disingenuous to think that. A parallel world is interchangeably referred to as a parallel universe or alternate world. They are planes of existence that coexist with our own universe, usually in a wider multiverse, but have different properties. Granted, the concept of parallel worlds works differently from fiction to fiction. In Western media, science fiction tends to use the many worlds interpretation, which does suggest that decisions can diverge the timeline, which in theory creates parallel worlds, which are exactly the same as our own universe, but follows a different history based on that decision. Whereas a lot of comic books suggest there are infinite parallel worlds, therefore a different universe for every possibility. The isekai genre of anime and manga similarly follow the plotline of a protagonist being displaced from their reality to another one. They usually start on Earth and are transported to another Earth in another universe that has a different history and fantasy elements, so it's the same thing. Momoshiki's isekai could be a universe in which Momoshiki harvested Earth, or maybe it's a similar reality in which we're just on a different planet. Naruto even went as far as questioning if it could be a hyperspace, which is an area with 4 spatial dimensions. Naruto with his 6 past powers is said to have the height of sensory powers, so it's possible he has a greater understanding of creation and could be right, but ultimately the fact that he's even questioning if it is one shows that he's unsure. He even claims that his basis for this was from the video games that he's seen his son Boruto play, so I wouldn't take it too seriously. All I can say is Momoshiki, like Kaguya, had created a space-time parallel to the Naruto universe and could gain even more power after fusing with Kinshiki. This forced Naruto and Sasuke, albeit slightly weakened, to face fused Momoshiki. During that fight, Momoshiki found himself getting overwhelmed because the Boruto movie novelization claimed that Naruto and Sasuke were more than just 1+1. They were the embodiment of the Uchiha Stone Tablet legend that claimed the yin and yang were 2 polar opposites that can act together to give rise to the universe. This means that Naruto and Sasuke, when working together, are considered a universe-level threat, which is consistent with the fact that the Boruto Directionary states that the majestic Atai was the strongest offensive and defensive ninjutsu of the time, even stronger than the Ameno Minaka expanding truth-seeking orb. In the final clash between Boruto and Momoshiki, they were said to be using, by the narrator, their most powerful attacks, which means Momoshiki was logically using a Rasengan that is stronger than his jutsu that is capable of creating a parallel dimension. Later, Naruto and Sasuke together faced Kara's leader, Jigen, who was considered their strongest foe yet, according to the anime. Jigen delivers them with such a bad beatdown that they doubt the majestic attire could have stopped him. This basically implies that Jigen is a beyond universal level threat and is deemed invincible by the main cast, which is plausible given the fact they fought on a world where the Hidden Leaf Village apparently didn't exist or never existed, which does suggest that he created a parallel dimension. Jigen is then forced to use his true form Ishiki and becomes even more powerful, but is confronted by Barian Mode Naruto, who despite running out of stamina before he could stop Ishiki, outboxed him and was said to possess even greater power than him. That sums up the majority of the universal arguments, but there is one left, and I saved this to the end because in all honesty it's far more believable than any of others. It's to do with Shibai Otsutsuki after he achieved godhood, but before he ascended to a higher dimension, which I won't be talking about. Shibai had eaten so many god fruits that he had a plethora of techniques called shinjutsu, which gave him god status. He could create natural disasters just by existing, and had abilities like intent reflection and claw mark teleportation. But his most powerful shinjutsu was the omnipotence, which is said to be able to materialize any wish. Who can use a small fraction of his power was able to manipulate the memories of every living creature connected through chakra. At full power, omnipotence could be used to overwrite reality, and Otsutsuki gods have allegedly, according to Momoshiki, been using it to manipulate the ninja world for many years without them noticing. The omnipotence is essentially a programming language used to generate entire worlds, which in context I think is referring to universes. It has even greater than planet level range since Code's memories were manipulated by the omnipotence while being in a different dimension. The omnipotence isn't creating physical material like planets, but rather materializing outcomes by coding spaces. Information about the Otsutsuki god Shibai can be found in the Boruto database section of the official Naruto website. It claims that the omnipotence was used by an Otsutsuki god to create the current world, which in context should refer to entire universes. If that is true, then this contradicts Kaguya creating the universe with her god tree, so that's why I think the omnipotence is a little bit more believable when speaking about universal Naruto. This wraps up all of the feats that could potentially be universe level in Naruto and Boruto, so let me know down below if I missed anything or got anything wrong. I know there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, so if I don't reply to your comment, feel free to join my Discord to talk to me, which will be linked down below. Check out my channel if you haven't already. There's a lot of power scaling videos that I've made that you might enjoy or find interesting at least. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you want to see more content like that. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.